Welcome into On Texas Football. This episode presented by Prize Picks. Jerry and CJ, I tell you what, we're going to talk about major trend lines over the first 3 weeks of spring practice for the University of Texas football team. There are several of them that we've talked about. I wrote about them this morning on ontexasfootball.com, but I wanted to get y'all's take on it because you're hearing, just like I am, behind the scenes and talking with folks. Let's take a look at those major trend lines that I kind of identified. Almost everybody I speak to, guys, that comes away from a spring practice that hasn't seen Texas at all, by the way. They only go to one practice because they're a high school coach or former player, etc. You know what they always talk about almost first? The overall talent of this team comes out first. CJ, I know you've been listening to people closely as well. Your take on the overall talent of the team and what's different about this than, say, years past?
Well, I think it's the overall depth of that talent, right? You look at each position, or at least on the offensive side of the ball, and you say, okay, Texas goes multiple deep at each position. Defensively, you feel that same way with maybe some questions in terms of what that secondary might look like with its depth, but all the way throughout, it's very deep. You know, Texas right now without a number of key starters on offense, and it doesn't sound like necessarily they don't look the part of a top-end SEC team. I don't know if that would have been the case over the past few years. So the top-end talent of the roster is showing up. You'll see that in point two, but ultimately it's the depth of that talent that I think catches a lot of attention so far.
Yeah, I think the talent is there, and Marcus Myers on Monday Morning's Coffee and Football called it elite depth. I thought that was a good term. It's like when the twos are actually starters elsewhere, that's saying something. Jerry, I want to go to health next because it's something that you actually brought up and I agree with during Coffee and Football. The team's health right now, and I do give credit to Steve Sarkisian, by the way. He has erred on the side of caution since he got to Texas as it related to a player's health. No rushing people back, no trying to get too much out of a guy when it's spring ball, and really it's not for keeps in spring. What do you make of the health? And that is a trend line, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure, and I'm knocking on wood here.
Yeah.
So, because there haven't been the non-contacts, right? The injuries that are just devastating, right? Some schools have had those already in spring or leading up to spring. Texas has been lucky, and I do think health is good fortune. It's luck. You're also in your preparation as athletes, sure, but there's also just bad luck that deals with that. And we're not talking about the guys that aren't there for spring, obviously. We're talking about the guys who have been competing this spring. They've had really good health so far, and again, knock on wood, you got a couple of weeks left, and I'm sure the Texas staff is knocking on the wood on the same table every morning when they walk in, but they haven't had the catastrophic major injuries that could impact next season. And that is a really good place to be when you're a talented team because you want to have the most margin for error you can. And the way you built this team and you constructed this roster, you want that to be what it looks like come August and September. And so far, so good in from that regard for Texas. And anytime you can walk out of a spring, and we'll see what happens in the next couple of weeks, and you say, we didn't have any season endings, then you're in a really good place.
I want to add this to the health. The other thing that I think is a trend is not just the health of the team currently, like Jerry, you're talking about not having any devastating injuries thus far in spring ball. I think it's just how much attention is paid to health. Holding out Michael Masunas for a couple of practice over something that most coaches would say, rub some dirt on it and get back in there. It's part of the trend. Like Sark has no interest in trying to tempt fate as it relates to health. And I think it's a trend line. CJ, Colin Simmons and Cam Coleman. I was asked, or I was told Texas has two. I wasn't asked. I was told Texas has two athletic freaks on its roster. They are Colin Simmons and Cam Coleman. That doesn't mean there aren't other great players. Trevor Gooseby, Jelani McDonald, Rasheem Biles, Arch Manning. They can all, Ryan Wingo. They can all be really, really good players. But I was told that Colin Simmons and Cam Coleman are just true athletic freaks. As a trend for Texas, are those what you need to win a national championship and or to compete for it?
Well, I think so at the positions that in which they play, right? For Colin Simmons, we've heard basically throughout this entire spring that he just wrecks practice, and he's gotten to a point where all right, he doesn't need to necessarily disrupt the entire play to understand that he's won a rep or done well in his responsibility for a single snap. So that's a sign in the right direction. But ultimately, look, you have a game breaker. You have probably the best edge rusher in the entire SEC, probably the entire country coming back-to-back double-digit sack seasons. And he's doing what he's supposed to be doing in year 3, not to mention the vocal side is there for Colin Simmons. And then Cam Coleman, look, Texas, it was a bit of a frustrating year at the receiver spot last year. You had some drops, you had some guys miss time. It wasn't necessarily up to snuff with what you had hoped when you went out and added Emmett Mosley and Ryan Wingo, and it was just, it never clicked fully for Arch Manning. But so far, Cam Coleman fits the bill, and you go out and you're aggressive in the portal for this exact reason. Those are the two on each side of the ball who consistently have been probably the most mentioned names so far this spring for either side.
Jerry, you look at that Colin Simmons, Cam Coleman piece. You agree with the athletic freak tag for those two?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And the crazy thing is, as much of a freak as Cam Coleman's been talked about, like on a Roy Williams level, Colin Simmons is probably the one. I mean, like, at this point, I'll be surprised if he doesn't run in the 4.4s at the NFL Combine.
I would agree.
I mean, like, we're talking about a guy who's going to be 6'3", 245, 250, probably running the 4.4s and vertical and something crazy, broad jumping something crazy. So, yeah, I totally agree on those two. And when you're on a team as talented as a Texas or an Ohio State last year, when you get singled out as those guys, I mean, that's a totally different level of athletic freak. And those guys certainly are deserving of that moniker, if you ask me. There's not much I can add to that other than yes.
Oh, we won't ask you that. Let's talk about Derek Cooper.
Yeah.
This is a interesting. The reason I mentioned him as a trend line. Look, we knew going in, Texas went out and got 2 1,000-yard rushers from the portal. All Big 12 running back, Raleek Brown, all ACC running back, Hollywood Smothers. Okay, and Jerry, you as well as we've been covering recruiting for 30 years, man.
Yeah.
We've heard of 5-star running back this coming in, and then he comes and he's just not quite ready, or there's something severely lacking. The trend line with this spring camp is none of those are true. He may be ready day one. That is a major piece because we all three know that Smothers and Brown are more smaller type backs.
Mm-hmm.
What do you make of Cooper and what they can do with him and how big a deal it is for the team itself?
Yeah, so he's such an interesting player, Bobby, because, the only people that are probably surprised the outside of Texas, Texas fans aren't, that people are surprised how well he's doing is the national rankings because he kept falling and falling and falling, and I never understood it. Well, what Derek Cooper has is football instincts. If you can play, I mean, look, we had Matt DeBuck on here from his coach at Cardinal Gibbons, whose son's at Texas, the long snapper. Way back, he talked about he played wide receiver, he played safety, he played corner, wherever he needed him. He goes to Shaman Amadana. He plays linebacker, he plays safety, he plays running back. That guy's just a football player, right? And I think because he didn't have all the production, he didn't carry the ball that much, it was a little lost how talented he was coming out of high school. So having been down to see him a couple of times, you got the same vibe you did from him, and they're different players that you got from Cedric Baxter in high school. And Cedric just had the rough injury issues at Texas. You got the same vibe, though. This guy's mature. He's a mature guy leaving high school that's a very talented player that plays running back. So I think that position, the skill set, the athleticism, Derek has all of that. And he was underrated in that regard coming out of high school. But he's got the same maturity level. He walks into Texas and he sees those 2,000-yard rushers, and he knows there's really good players there, and he understands how to get on the field. He understands how to look at those guys and how to look at himself and his skill set versus the other guys, and he's mature enough to say, okay, this is what I need to do. These are the strengths I need to show, and I think that's what he's doing. I think
– yeah, Jerry, that is the trend. That's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah.
That is the trend. You want the guys to be picking things up and going forward. And Derek Cooper is doing exactly that. All right. We need to say thank you real quick to our sponsor. Our sponsor today is Prize Picks. If you're watching games and not on Prize Picks, get in on the action. Prize Picks is America's #1 sports picks app. It's super simple to use. You're not dealing with all the complicated stuff. You just pick more or less on player stats. That's it. Points, yards, strikeouts, whether you're watching, you build your lineup and ride. You can literally make a lineup in less than 60 seconds. Today, we're taking Terrace Reed in the national championship to have more than 9.5 points. The big man has averaged 20.8 points per game during the tournament. We're also taking Elliot Cadeau to have more than 6.5 assists as he averaged 10 his last 2 games and has no fewer than 7 going all the way back to mid-March. That's the fun of it. You build your own read on the game or players, and you just roll with it. Prize Picks is available in most states, including right here in the Lone Star State, along with Florida, Georgia, California, and many more. Download the app. Use code HMA. Play just $5, and you're getting $50 in lineups instantly. That's right. Prize Picks is hooking you up when you download the app with $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Just use code HMA when you sign up. It's a new week with new games, so get after it and ride these picks. As always, play smart, play responsibly, play Prize Picks. All right, Jerry and CJ, I want to go next. Maybe one of the surprises of spring, and it's certainly a trend line, and that is the play of Bo Masco, who was described to me over the weekend as CB1, cornerback 1, period. Jerry, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, look, of all the guys we talk about, this guy can start at 2 different positions. That's really trending. And playmaking on the ball is really trending. At Rutgers, obviously, didn't play with great defensive talent around them. So maybe those playmaking skills weren't as easily seen from him because they were in a tough spot at Rutgers. At Texas so far, with all the players around them, that ability to create pressure on the quarterbacks, disrupt timing. Bo Masco is trending as a playmaker on the ball, multiple interceptions this spring. He's also trending in that, yes, he is cornerback 1. He also could be nickel 1, depending on what Will Muschamp wanted to do with his defensive personnel. He may be trending more than any other player this spring at Texas, in my estimation.
CJ Vogel, your thoughts on Bo Masco?
No, I agree with that. And, it may come as a surprise in the sense that a kid from Rutgers is coming in and making such a splashy impact already for Texas. But look, an honorable mention cornerback in the Big Ten. Look, I'm not going to get into the argument of if he was at a different school, would that be a first, second, or third team? But Jerry's right. There's not much help at Rutgers. And so you stand out, but on the same time, you're put on an island at the cornerback position. So I don't know necessarily if I'm super surprised by this, but to hear that already, about 9 practices in, he's becoming such a playmaker in that secondary, I think that's fantastic for Texas, especially with Will Muschamp and the way in which he wants to run his defense and specifically cornerback. That should be a lot of hands on the football and a lot of havoc plays in the secondary.
I was told 3 guys in the secondary have probably locked down starting spots: Jelani McDonald, Grayson Littleton, and Bo Masco.
Yeah.
The rest, we're going to figure it all out, and they're going to battle. But those 3, that's quite the development, because that means he's better than even you maybe thought coming in. All right, offensive line, CJ, I want to mention this. The trend line here that's important isn't so much that, hey, these guys are going to be all world. It's going to be the best offensive line Texas has ever had, yada, yada, yada. That's not the discussion. The discussion point is that we think it's headed in the right direction. And I pointed out in this morning's article, I think a large part of that was the addition of Melvin Siani at right tackle, allowing Brandon Baker to move into guard, and then also the ability for Jordan Coleman, guys, to get reps at left tackle while Trevor Gooseby is out. Dylan Sikorsky and Jackson Christian are also getting key backup reps right now, in my opinion, and adding some depth. I just think it's a positive trend line. It's not, oh man, they're going to rely on this offensive line. They're going to move people. It's just, it feels, and from listening to people, like this one has more of an identity brewing as opposed to maybe patchwork is what I would describe last year. CJ, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you could tie this one back to the first trend line that we talked about with overall talent. And again, I think that speaks a little bit to the depth in that offensive line room, right? And in a way, it's almost beneficial now that Trevor Goosby's not on the practice field, because then you get to figure out truly what can Jordan Coleman provide? Where's Ajonte Newman in all of this? You know, when Andre Kojo comes back, do you need him at left or right, or could you spin him to the interior, right? Last year, you were pretty hamstrung when Kojo went down. You had a lot of unknowns of who your sixth and seventh best offensive linemen were, and as a result, it took a while to get you to a place where you were confident with the consistency of your offensive line. This year, I'm not going to say it's going to be significantly different and better, but it does feel like what we're hearing a lot about is explosives in the run game, right? Outside of Colin Simmons, they're finding ways to, protect the passer at times. So that is encouraging. Again, it's not going to be, a finished product week one, but it does feel like this is a different offensive line from what we saw a year ago, especially early in the season.
I think they're more athletic overall. I think that's the key. Hey, portal class, Jerry. Certainly one of the highlights of this group, and we've been told that by multiple people that have gone through the gates there over at Dennis Fields. Your thoughts on those?
Yeah, I mean, look, Cam Coleman, we talked about that receiver position. Running backs, we've talked about a lot. So we talked about Bo Masco. I feel like we will always not talk about Rasheem Biles enough in general since he signed with Texas. I think he's a fantastic player and can be an All-American candidate. That fact that he's come in and Texas loves him, that shouldn't surprise any of us, right? He's trending. The defensive class, I think, is trending in the portal defensive class because of Biles, because of Masco, but it goes further than that. Justin Cryer as an A-gap thumper has done very well. He's getting a lot of praise, right? Being able to play that very important role in Will Muschamp's defense. And then Ian Jaffard. Look, they want him to continue to lose weight, but he's doing exactly what they expected him to do over the ball. So I think the defensive portal class, while the offense is being talked about the most, of course, the defensive portal class is trending right now as well. It's on a good trend line.
Yeah, 6 starters coming in from in the article this morning I wrote on ontexasfootball.com, guys, 6 starters from the portal class, no doubt about it in my mind, and another 6 that will be in the 2-deep rotational at worst, including all 3 specialist positions: kicker, punter, and long snapper. So this is not just a good portal class with elite talent, to Jerry's point, with a Coleman or a Biles or whoever you want to add, but also the depth of it. And they're having an immediate impact. And part of why people are talking about the overall talent level on campus. All right, defensive speed. I left this for last because I kind of wanted everybody to pitch in on this. Defensive team speed has taken a step in the right direction. Leonga Lafau, for example, not the fastest defender, not heady player to no end. We all agree with that.
Yeah.
Were they necessarily fast at corner last year? Not necessarily. Were they fast at safety? Defensive team speed is moving in the right direction. And whether it's getting Cade Phillips on the field more, whether it's adding a Rasheem Biles over a Leonga Lafau, and then you're going to add Ty Anthony Smith back in, whether it's getting Jelani McDonald up to speed, or whatever you want to say right now, defensive team speed is something that multiple people have said, hey, it's just a little bit different. It's a little quicker. CJ, your thoughts?
Look, the defenses over the last 3 years or so that have given Sark the biggest issues are that of Georgia and Ohio State. You can't go east to west on those teams. You have to go north and south. And when you got big boys up front, it makes life all the more difficult. If that is something Texas is comfortable with their team speed to basically take away that east to west running ability, the outside zone, if you will, well, Texas has enough beef up front where we've seen it under Kenny Baker. And and Johnny Nansen, that running the football up the middle is going to be very difficult. That is something that is very encouraging to me, especially with Biles and Smith and Atkinson and Cryer just coming in to clean things up. I think that's something that is very underrated right now with this team. The secondary is where I'm still circling, saying, okay, I want to see it. I want to see it on the field first before I truly buy in, especially knowing that there's going to be some new faces, new responsibilities back there.
Yeah, they need to create the chemistry, not just the speed. For sure. Jerry, your thoughts on defensive speed?
Yeah, I think they got really good athletes at the edge position that are that speed at the edge position. More obviously, Colin Sims is an All-American, but Lance Jackson, Zena, young Richard Wesley, they got some really good athletes there. They got good speed. I think the speed at linebacker is going to be super impressive on the field. Rasheem Biles flies around. Who knows what he's going to run at the NFL Combine? It's probably going to be 4.5 or less, right in that area, maybe a little less. Ty Anthony Smith, super fast athlete at linebacker that plays so well in space. And I think you're seeing, even Rocky Cummings is going to be a really good athlete. I mean, I think they did a good job addressing speed at linebacker in the portal and in the high school class. And, sometimes you get that sleeper like Rocky Cummings, and he's going to end up being better than you think. Secondary-wise, I think Bo Masco, the speed of Bo Masco. I think, look, the hard thing for me with defensive speed to where CJ's point is, we're not seeing all the safeties on the field yet, right? Some of the best athletes in this program are Phil Sami and Jonah Williams. They're not out there. But I think the team speed on defense overall, Cade Phillips is a really fast athlete, right? Warren Roberson's a really good athlete. So I think this team speed on defense is definitely kicked up a notch. And here's why. Edge, overall, linebacker. I think Will Muschamp's walking into some pretty fast athletes at those positions, and that's a good place to be.
We didn't even get into the fact that defensive team speed, guys, could be amplified by the way that Will Muschamp calls his defense.
Yeah,
which I think is a multiplying factor. Right. All right. I want to say thank you all for listening to this episode of On Texas Football. We've got more over at ontexasfootball.com. We'll have a live stream again this evening as well. Thanks also to our friends over at Prize Picks. Make sure you use code HMA when you download the app. Again, that's code HMA when you download the app. For Jerry Hamilton, CJ Vogel, and our producer, Matt Hutchinson, I'm Bobby Burton. Major trend lines for Texas. I like where this team's headed right now. 9 practices in. 10 starts tomorrow. Hook 'em horns.
Hey guys, Blake Monroe here from Coffee and Football. YouTube thinks that you're going to like this video right here. And if the algorithm knows ball, it's a good one. So go check it out. And then don't forget, hit that like and subscribe button.